Hello and welcome to the Flourishing Introvert Talks with me, Jo Rawbone. This is the podcast that celebrates the natural gifts of introverts so that we can flourish in all situations. Episode 178, The Art of Letting Go as an Introvert. This last week has been cathartic for me and not without its pain. You see, I moved out of my beautiful office in a serviced building. No biggie, you might think. Loads of people have done that recently. So why did I find it so challenging? Because it meant letting go. And on many different levels, I found out. I needed, of course, to let go of some physical stuff, as you might expect. And with that came letting go emotionally in some cases. What I hadn't bargained for was letting go of some beliefs. So in this episode, I'm sharing some of my letting go journey, how I think it might be different for me as an introvert, and my key learning. I'm very well aware of the rich tapestry of human personalities, and I have come to value almost as many personalities as I have encountered. Our thoughtful and introspective nature is a valuable trait, and it can also be a double-edged sword, particularly when it comes to letting go. And just to be clear, not that any clarification is probably needed, by letting go, I'm talking about the process of releasing emotional attachment to thoughts, feelings, negative emotions or experiences that are hindrances to personal progress. Letting go serves to stop these aspects that are having a detrimental grip on our lives so that we are no longer held back by them. From a psychological perspective, the human mind has a propensity to cling to the familiar. However, this adherence can form mental blockades and make it difficult for us to embrace change. The thought of letting go often induces fear and anxiety as it involves venturing into the unknown. However, it is essential to recognise that clinging to past attachments can hinder emotional and personal development. Unlike extroverts who seek stimulation through social interaction and engagement with the external world, we know that we are more inclined to find solace within our minds. This, however, can lead to constant rumination, that overthinking that is difficult to detach from. Now, I'm not a serious overthinker in many situations, but when I do, I really do. I believe it's the labyrinthine nature of my inner world that can make the process of letting go much more challenging for me and maybe for other introverts too. So let me just share a little bit of the context of this situation. I moved into the office I'm talking about in the autumn of 2019, and I moved there from a small, rather rundown office in the town centre. I'd been in that office since 2014, and before that I'd been working in my home office. Then my husband Tony started working from home, and sharing the office just wasn't working. You know how it can be for introverts sharing an office, even with, or maybe especially with, those we love and live with. It really wasn't the ideal setup for us. Plus, I wanted to be able to see coaching clients away from their offices. So having that first office worked really well until I decided I needed to be somewhere where the wind didn't whistle in through the gaps around the windows. So it was most definitely time for me to move on. The new office that I chose was closer to home, so I could walk to it when not weighed down by heavy bags. And it was bright, air-conditioned, and importantly, draft-proof. I made this office my own, and the staff at the centre always loved to come into my office, as did I. Then came lockdown, and after watching my calendar empty of all of the face-to-face training and coaching, I soon picked up delivering and seeing clients virtually. Of course, this was from my hurriedly put together new home office. this time in a spare bedroom as I really needed to be on my own for this work. I mastered how to make the experience as close to being in the room as possible. Polls, breakout rooms, fillable PDFs for manuals, and manipulating my screen view so I could see the faces and reactions of the delegates. Now, I know I'm one of the rare trainers and introverts here, but I love virtual delivery. When my delegates get a break, so do I. I don't have to leave home at silly o'clock to drive or commute for hours and get stuck on the car park that is the M25, London's orbital motorway, if you're not familiar with it. And I could be back in family mode moments after my work was finished. However, over these last few months, I've hardly been in my office, and even the reception staff would greet me happily with, "Hello, stranger." So my beautiful, cosy and welcoming office stopped making commercial sense. There was only one sensible thing to do: to move out and back home again. This was relatively easy on a practical front, as I still had my lockdown home office set up. Even so, I prevaricated for over a month. Why? Difficulty letting go. I really valued having somewhere to retreat to that wasn't just a room in my house. I could far more easily shut the door on that than I can in my home office. Everything I needed was there on hand, my boxes of training materials, my vast array of books, and you know my propensity for tsundoku, the Japanese term for people who buy and keep more books than they can physically read in their lifetime. Yep, that's me. And I always like to have my books close by, as when I need to dip to remind me of something, they're just there. So I know I had to physically let go of some things I held dear and that I once thought I couldn't do without. It is true that I have more books on my e-reader these days, but I don't intend on buying all of my physical books again on my Kindle. And with my physical books, I seem to know exactly where to turn to find the page I'm looking for. The moving physically took some organising, so I now have a unit where all of my books are stored for the time being and in the way they were in my office. That way, if I really need a book, I can find it pretty quickly. But it means I have to be a bit more organised because I can't just reach across and pick up a book right now. Ultimately, I plan to have my home office set up in such a way that my key books are here with me for easy reference. And because of my tsundoku tendencies, I will also have to actually get rid of many books. I'm not sure whether to donate them, to sell them, or just ditch them. I know I'll figure out the right thing to do when the moment comes, though. This highlights one of the first necessary skills and attitudes of letting go, which is to focus on what you can control. You know what a fan I am of Viktor Frankl, and it was he who, when interred in a concentration camp, noticed that those who did well did so because they focus and action what they can control. Then I knew I had to emotionally let go. Let go of just how safe I and others felt in this room, how beautiful it looked, and how well it enabled people, including me, to relax in the space that I'd created. This was a tougher letting go in many ways, as I wouldn't ever be welcoming clients physically into my home office, so it wasn't just a matter of recreating what I had before. But I would be welcoming people virtually into my space, which, to be fair, I've been doing since early on in the pandemic. But I decided I needed to make extra effort, both with the physical look of my backdrop, but also how I show up. Creating that safe space is paramount to me. I'm reminded to consider Dr. Tim Clark's first 2 levels of psychological safety: inclusion safety and learner safety. I will continue to ensure that virtual learners feel safe to show up as who they really are and to learn without fear of ridicule. Remember, mostly we learn by making mistakes. This requires the next skill of letting go, which is non-judgmental thinking. This has been my aim for many years, and noticing my thoughts without attaching a label can still be challenging. So a reminder never goes amiss. What I hadn't bargained for was realizing that I had beliefs I needed to let go of. That is, until I noticed my resistance to the move. You see, I didn't even appreciate I had beliefs to be let go of. And I know they might sound ridiculous to you, but they held me firmly in their grip for some time, even once I'd given notice on my office. And one of those beliefs was the source of much sadness that made the move so much harder to complete. And the belief I'm talking about is that proper businesses have business premises and a smart office. I also know it's not just me who has this belief, as a couple of business colleagues in the same line of work as me said they hold this belief too. I don't know exactly when I started to believe this, but it probably coincided with being asked to tender for big pieces of work. Until that moment, all of my work had come through referrals and recommendations, so people were taking me at face value. In fact, it was a referral that got me the invite to the tendering process in the first place. And yet, I think that was the point in which the belief was installed. You'll also recognise this as a generic limiting belief, as opposed to a self-limiting belief. Hanging on to this belief was holding me back and preventing me from making the change that I both desired and was required. So I used my flip your limiting belief process to find a more empowering belief. This was helped enormously by something a previous client, Tim, said to me over lunch. He offered me the gift and I accepted it willingly. He was talking about a perfect profit business, and one of the factors is that they don't need an office. Bing! I now had the basis for my empowering belief. Ironically, these 3 areas that I identified fitted pretty well with 2 of the typical barriers associated with letting go. The first is the fear of the unknown. You know, as humans, we are creatures of habit. The known, no matter how constricting, often feels safer than the unfamiliar. Our introverted minds conjure a myriad of what-ifs, anchoring us to the current state. So we need to be mindful of that. And the second barrier is an identity crisis. Many of our attachments are entwined with our sense of identity. The fear of losing this identity makes the process of letting go daunting. In my case, giving up my office seemed to equate with not being considered a serious business, which in turn was a big identity crisis for me. So in overcoming the barriers and addressing my 3 areas, the physical, the emotional and the belief, I first recognised what I was holding on to. Then I noticed the impact it was having. I then worked out my fixes, my solutions, the things I could control. Lastly, whilst being gentle with myself, I purposefully chose to let those things go that were no longer serving me. As it turns out, I'm truly grateful for this situation to consciously experience the letting go process. I think I might be better at it next time I need to let go of something, and hopefully be less of a pain to my accountability buddies and my loved ones. They have been very patient with me. And we have to take our own sweet time with a process like this. I know that if someone tried to hurry me, I'd probably just dig in and get more stubborn. So if you feel held back and recognise that you have some letting go to do, take your time. Apply a logical approach like my 4 steps and be gentle with yourself. We're only human after all. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, then please subscribe, rate us and leave a comment, because we know that helps other people find the podcast. And if other people find us, other introverts can flourish.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.